the projects that I have really enjoyed the most working on have been the most collaborative. And often that means like the whole band and the production team goes to like some house that somebody's family owns or like an Airbnb somewhere in upstate. And we like find all the weird, like we put a mic over the toilet bowl to get the reflection off the water,
Right,
like that.
right.
I think like that's kind of the world that I come from. And
Okay.
it's a little like scrappier, definitely. But the imperfection of that sound, I think, can give records so much character a lot of the time.
Welcome to episode 127 of the Bass Shed podcast. My name is Ryan Roberts. What's up, folks? I am proud to announce the transcription book that Jerry Jamont and I have been working on is finally slated to be released August 31st at a workshop we are doing at Collage, a place for art and culture in San Pedro, California. The book is available also at thebassshedacademy.org. Initially, it was slated to be just an ebook, right? Just the digital download copy. But good old-fashioned hard copies will be available. What's unique about this book is, to my knowledge, it's the only transcription book where that also has a video component, and you can hear Jerry talk about his recollections of the recording sessions, about what was going on during that time, some kind of information about what was the impetus for some of the songs that were written, information about the songwriters, really funny anecdotes about the sessions and what it was like working with all the famous legends that he had worked with. So stop by thebassshedacademy.org and there will be more information there. Also, on August 31st, after the masterclass with Jerry Jamont, I will be leading a trio with Andy Waddell on guitar and Joel Taylor on drums for the folks in the Southern California area. Again, that will be at Collage in San Pedro, a place for art and culture. It is also available to live stream. So, anybody who wants to check that out, I feel like most people might know of Joel Taylor. He's been doing a lot of great things for a long time, and I'm looking forward to playing with him. We'll be live streaming the event. I'll have a link up to that at thebassshedacademy.org shortly. I'm still waiting on the venue to send it to me because they're handling the live stream. But that is happening. We'll be leading the trio down there, and this kind of kicks off a residency that I'm going to be doing. So the last Saturday of every month, the Bass Shed Academy will be holding a master class with a different bass player every month, and then there will be a concert at night by someone, not always me, but maybe me, I'm not sure. It depends on who's available, actually, is the big deal. But again, stop by the Bass Shed Academy website, bassshedacademy.org, and check that out. LemurMusic.com. Everything you need for the double bass and electric bass can be found at LemurMusic.com. Stop by their website, enter the promo code TheBassShed for 10% off. Shop from their inventory of bows, basses, rosin, accessories for the double bass, pickups, preamps, whatever you need. LemurMusic.com. Use the promo code TheBassShed, all one word, for 10% off. On the episode is New York bassist Andrew Ryan. Andrew Ryan is also a member of the group Nine Horses. The band Nine Horses has a new album out titled Strum. This album showcases a unique blend of classical, jazz, and contemporary music. Joining Andrew Ryan in the group is Joe Brent and Sarah Caswell. The music by Nine Horses is deeply imaginative and emotive. The album Strum is made up of 8 tracks, and each tune really takes the listener on a journey with a lot of hairpin turns. It's a fantastic record and very engaging. The interplay between all the musicians in the group and the layering on the album is really delicate. It joins together really cool in a nice way. Make sure to click on the link in the show notes and definitely give the album a listen. Andrew Ryan will discuss the band and we'll also chat a little bit about the music business. Andrew also works in music production and we discuss recording techniques related to the double bass. I had a great time checking out the album, Strummed by Nine Horses, and I had a great time chatting with Andrew Ryan about the record and more. And here it is. Here's my talk with New York bassist and member of the group Nine Horses, Andrew Ryan. All right, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. You have a better podcast voice than me.
Do I? Oh,
Yeah.
I was maybe putting it on a little bit, but
No, keep it on. Keep it on.
I love the vibe. I love the vibe here, though. This is you got the setup, man. This is professional.
It's a rig, yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's cool. Where in the country are you?
I'm in Brooklyn, New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. How long you been there?
8 years now.
Okay. Originally from where?
Denver, Colorado.
Okay.
Yeah.
See that makes the string like the how do I want to put it? Well, I'll come back to that. So what took you to New York?
Just curiosity mostly. I went to school in Central New York at Ithaca College, and I kind of, after making that move across the country, it sort of was like, where do you go after that? And there's sort of a pipeline obviously from Central New York to the city, and
Sure.
Yeah, that ended up kind of just being the impetus, and obviously wanting to kind of be around the music scene here, which was a huge part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how is the scene there? From what I hear, I'm in LA. So from what I hear about New York, the scene in New York is driven by Broadway.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's Broadway is sort of this. I've never really engaged with that. I've never played or subbed on a show or anything, but I definitely am curious, and definitely it's a nice gig if you can get it. And I increasingly am working with more and more people who that's kind of their bread and butter.
Are you interested?
For sure.
Yeah, you do.
Definitely. I mean, like I think I have some classical training, and like I play with the bow and can read relatively well, and so I feel like it kind of aligns with my skill set. I will say, like, just kind of, I guess, aesthetically, I'm not like one of the people that's kind of really drawn to musical theater. Like I know a lot of those folks who play on Broadway, that is like, they love that music. That's really what they want to do.
That's interesting, actually. I've never come across that. I've come across cats that are like, well, that's the gig, so I'll do this, while I continue writing improvised music or try to get a jazz record out, or,
that's sort of
while
my
I do
vibe. Something
creatively over here, but that's steady work, and I'll do it, and it'll suck my soul, but whatever.
Yeah. That's definitely more my I have to say that the thought of playing, and I have a lot of friends who do it, and deep respect for that skill. Like, it's really tough to play the same thing night after night after night and sound the same, like very little variation. I think musically I'm like maybe a little more of a wild card, and I'm more interested in that.
Right. I mean, I kind of feel the same thing about, like, even touring. Like, if I was going to play one act, and go out on the road for, 9 months, that's the same as doing a show to me. It is a show. It's just a stage show. And that never really appealed to me.
Yeah.
It's that would, and then I see, like, dudes that get off the road. Anybody, not just men. I don't want to be gender specific there, but people get off the road, and then their chops, they have road chops. They've been doing the same. I'm like, I don't want road chops. Like, I want to keep pursuing this and getting better at what I do, and I don't want to go out for 9 months or a year or something. And
totally, and especially with bass players, right? Because it's like, often the bass you're playing on the road, like a lot of people do the bass du jour thing, where you're borrowing an axe on the road or whatever. You're like it's usually like not an ideal. I have to say, from my own experience, like really not an ideal scenario for kind of like being in the shed.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think so. I think so too. I'd rather continue to But then, I mean, we all know how it goes. Like whatever you're not doing, you wish you were doing that thing.
Of
But
course,
then you're
yeah,
doing that thing, and you're
yeah,
like, I shouldn't have done this. Why'd I say yes to this?
yeah. Grass is always greener, or as a friend of
Yeah,
mine says, that your grass is always brown. And
right.
that's
Yeah, well put. Well put. So speaking about creative outlet, let's talk about this new record you got out.
yeah, yeah, man.
So how long has the group been together? With the name of the group, introduce the group to
The
listeners, and then
yeah,
yeah, let's start there.
the name of the group is Nine Horses, like the
Hmm.
number nine and the animal. And it's sort of exists in the new music sphere, if we can, that term is not one that I super love, but we can talk about that more later.
All
But
right.
it's contemporary improvised chamber music.
Okay.
And um the group has been together. I joined the group in 2016, and they did one record before I joined. So I feel like they've been together since around 2013 or 2012. I should know that, um, but
That's
yeah,
a pretty good run for a group to be together. I mean, you've been in the band 8 years, and then they've been together 10 or 11. That's
yeah.
They have a following built in, kind of. When by the time you joined.
Sort of, yeah. I think it was still kind of just in this is like what we were talking about earlier. This is one of those projects of a bunch of people who do a million other things,
Hmm.
right? So, we've been together 8 years, but it even feels funny to me to say that because it's the amount of gigs we've played probably wouldn't reflect that, right?
Right, 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 right.
Um, but it's great, like I think those musical situations can be really great in another way because it's like, you get to have these reunions
Hmm.
a couple times a year, or, like once every couple months or whatever, and reconnect with each other and kind of see what everyone's up to, see what everyone's into and listening to, it's
Right.
like that kind of, it's like hanging out with your cousins
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
growing up and stuff. So that's a really great thing. Yeah. The new record is called Strum.
Hmm.
And the main group, kind of the core group, is a trio. It's Joe Brent on mandolin, who also composes a lot of the music. um, Sarah Caswell plays violin and hardanger fiddle, and I play bass.
Hmm.
And the records are like these expanded versions of that. So there's like piano and percussion, and it sort of starts to resemble more of like a modern jazz ecosystem on a
Okay.
lot. So yeah.
Then how does the writing reflect both improvisation and chamber music? Is it a lot of through composed pieces that have sections for improvisation? Or do you guys, is it more of a lead sheet style where you just got chords and a melody and it's different
Yeah,
every night?
I think it's definitely, it's a bit of from column A and a bit from column B, but
Yeah.
definitely more of the former. Like it's through composed music. The pieces are very involved, in my opinion. Like it's hard, it's hard to play. And I think where improvisation kind of comes into it, yes, there will be solo sections or things like that where it kind of turns into a more of a lead sheet thing, or we're playing the form and there are chord changes, and sort of more of like a jazz improvisation sort of scenario. But there's also kind of an implicit understanding in the band that has been around for a long time, that Joe will write out these really involved pieces of through composed music. And he kind of says, what he always says is that they're sort of like three quarters written or two-thirds written. And
Hmm.
he says, play the ink unless you can think of something better. So
Nice.
often it's very cool to work with a composer in that capacity, because I think, like, especially a lot of people who come from the classical music side, that relationship is so rigid. I mean, often the composers are dead, and so
Hmm.
you can't really negotiate with them.
Right. Yeah. 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 Right. Right.
um, but yeah, Joe is super open about, for instance, he doesn't understand the idiosyncrasies of the bass the way that I
Hmm.
do, or have necessarily the vocabulary of, like, say, James Jamerson,
Right.
or Ray Brown, or like another, and often he'll just write that stuff in the charts. He'll just be like, do that James Jamerson thing, or
Yeah. Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Rather than him going through and like trying to have a deep understanding of that.
Sure.
It's this cool kind of almost like it's like a concession of these things that he doesn't know. Whereas I think a lot of the time the big C composer is like supposed to be this musical expert of everything, and we all
Sure.
kind of know that that can't be true. I mean, it's
Right.
impossible, right? So yeah, that's to answer your question. That's kind of how improvisation works into the pieces. A lot of the time, by the end of the recording process, or even like years later, I'm looking at these charts and I'm like, oh yeah, wait, that doesn't look like anything like what I actually end up playing on this tune when we play it live. But in that way, maybe it's like another opportunity for the music to kind of keep growing and
Sure.
changing, as we do. And the other two members of the group, Sarah and Joe, are both. I think they're one of the things I really admire about them is that they're kind of always pursuing another. They're pursuing more music. It's sort of
Right.
like they're looking to grow all the time and expand their knowledge and their skills, and that's kind of like, I think that's part of the key of like keeping the band kind of going.
Sure.
um yeah, so
Nice.
anyway.
Nice. What I'm always curious what the story behind band names is. Where does Nine Horses come from?
Yes, yeah, Nine Horses is a let me see it, make sure I can get this right.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
I
yeah.
believe it comes from, Joe is a big reader of poetry, and
Okay.
it comes from a poem by Billy Collins, who is a former poet laureate.
Okay.
um, and it's sort of the thematic tendril of it is that it's about a gift that his wife gave him. There is this old famous photo of like a horse galloping, and it's 9 different frames,
Oh yeah,
and it
okay.
basically, yeah, I'm sure a lot of
I've
people
seen
are
something
familiar with
similar
it.
to that. I don't
Yeah. And anyway, the idea being that, kind of small and simple things um, like this rather limited chamber group, this chamber
mhm.
trio, can expand into feelings that are bigger than, you know what they may seem. I
Sure.
believe that, he'll give you he would give you a better uh, description than I can, but I
Right.
think that's it.
How'd you get involved with the band?
Um, yeah, it's a very funny, interesting story. When I was in school, my teacher Nicholas Walker took a sabbatical one of the years I was there, and kind of he kind of picked his replacement, was a great bass player who was in New York at the time called Sean Conley. Um, and so he kind of came over, and I worked with him pretty in depth, and we got to know each other really well, and we had that key kind of, I think a huge part of our relationship was like, um our ages, we were close enough in age that it felt like like a real relationship, and like we were kind of like pulling in the same direction musically, and had a similar understanding of the world of music and the industry and all of that. And Sean had been working with Nine Horses.
Hmm.
And anyway, when it kind of came time, he was like doing other things, and had some other gigs that were taking up too much of his time. So he sort of called me a few years later after I had finished school, and was like, "Hey, you should, you know, come hang out with Sarah and Joe and play some of this music, and like, would you be interested in doing that?" And I ended up coming to New York, and we just had a rehearsal, and then we played. The first gig I played with the band was it was a competition, actually, which was very strange. But yeah, it was for this organization that I am not sure if it's still going, but it was kind of put on by a university, with an endowment that was sort of like, you know, let's have a thought experiment about what the 21st century chamber group is. And we played that, and ended up winning the prize. And it was like, you know, and then it sort of just kept snowballing. Like it just kind of worked out. And yeah. it's sort of a funny. I tell that story a lot when we do academic residencies and stuff like that because I think it's really indicative of um, how the world of professional music actually works a lot of the time, which is that like unfortunately it's like not a meritocracy. Like I'm sure there are other bass players who could have stepped in
Mhm.
and played circles around me on that gig. I was 22 at the time. Like
Right.
um but just kind of being in the right place, the right time, and knowing the right people can make so much of the difference. And in a way, I think that's a good thing, and in another way, I think that's like can sometimes be a shame and can sometimes rattle people. But anyway, that's how it happened. So
What had you spent any time thinking about the what the competition was investigating through their, pursuit of what is the chamber group like in the 21st century? Had you spent any time thinking about that in your artistic progression?
sure, yeah, I think I'm like naturally sort of a very pragmatic person, and
Mm.
both my parents are both from the Midwest, and that's just sort of really deeply embedded in me. So something like pursuing a career in music,
Yeah.
like for most of us, I think wasn't like it wasn't super. They've always been super supportive and everything. My family's been great, but I think I went in knowing that it wasn't going to be all sunshine and rainbows all the time, right?
Hmm.
And or that it wouldn't be easy, right? And
Sure.
it wouldn't be straightforward. So I think, yeah, prior to that, and especially after that, I
Yeah.
think I have spent quite a bit of time thinking about that, and I think even when I was in school and kind of when I was in school, I was sort of doing the crossover thing and studying classical music and jazz, but really was having this realization that I think a lot of people were having then and still are kind of having of like the music industry is really changing all the
Yeah.
time. Like I had
Sure.
classical teachers growing up who were like, you know, their unions were going into negotiations about their wages, and like,
Right.
the orchestras were folding and all of that stuff. So I think it wasn't a super optimistic view of the classical music world. Obviously, the jazz world is kind of it's different, but kind of a similar outlook in a lot of ways. And so,
Sure.
um, yeah, I think early on I had sort of adopted this posture of like, well, okay, how can you make this work? Not necessarily from a future proofing standpoint for myself, but um, like what are the skills that are necessary to kind of um, be broad,
Hmm.
uh, to kind of make a go of it, no matter what the this ends up being. I'm still not sure if I've done that, but that was
It's I think the academic pursuit of music is always interesting, and I got called by a college a couple years in a row to sit in on these board meetings. They bring in professionals from outside the school to talk about how the school can, adapt their curriculum. And so it was me and a bunch of people just kind of from the scene in different aspects of the scene. And we were talking about it, and the fascinating thing about academia being relevant is by the time school catches up, it's already outdated
totally.
because it's got to go through bureaucratic so many bureaucratic hoops to get things finalized and implemented. Then, like, okay, 7 years later, whatever you were pursuing to like, oh, we're going to be relevant. Now it's outdated. So I think the best they could do is talk about the relevance and necessary skills to adapt, and you just got to be flexible and either like stick to your guns, and if you're pursuing classical or jazz and you just want to do that, then like go all in, own every Hank Mobley record, know
Yeah.
every B side of Monk, or
Yeah.
classical, know every excerpt ever written. Either go all in or really be flexible.
Yeah, and I think a key part of that's really well said. I think a key part of that is like, if there are students out there who are like all they want to do is play jazz, and I know those people, like we all know
Sure.
those people, then like, yeah, that's what you have to do. Like you
Yeah.
can't, don't, nobody's telling you to like hedge your bets at that point. I think if that's where you're at, I think I was in a different place
Hmm.
when I was younger. I was sort of like, I'm not sure, like I'm not sure I can play, you know, Beethoven symphonies for the rest of my life. Like I totally love that, and recently just got to play a Mahler symphony again for the first time in, like close to 10 years or something. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, this is so cool. I was like looking around the orchestra and I was like, this is the coolest band ever. Like,
Yeah.
like it's an awesome band. The orchestra is an awesome band. But yeah, I think I was just sort of, I mean, call it indecisive or whatever. But I wasn't sure that
Hmm.
that's what I really wanted to do.
Sure.
Um, and so yeah, then I think opting to kind of like diversify
Yeah.
um, was the was sort of the logical choice at that point.
Sure.
Um,
Sure. I mean, obviously, the band Nine Horses is something that you've put a lot of time and energy to invest in. And I want to talk more about the record in a second. But what are some other creative pursuits that you have going on to keep a diverse uh,
yeah,
thing happening?
yeah, it's only gotten more complex from there. Yeah, I after I moved to New York, I started working. I found myself, everybody listening to this podcast, I'm sure will be aware that when you play the bass, especially in kind of a non-specialized uh, context, you're sort of whenever somebody decides that you are in their band, that's the kind of music you play. Like you're all of a
Right.
sudden
Yeah.
you're like that kind of bass player.
Right. Right. You're that
Um,
guy. You're like a singer
whether or
songwriter
not
person.
yeah,
Yeah. Right.
yeah, exactly. So it's exactly that. I started working with a lot of songwriters, and before COVID was sort of like spending 200 days on the road a
Mm.
year, with that,
Okay.
and a few different people, just kind of really, really, really road dogging it a lot. And
Yeah.
then COVID hit, obviously, and even before that, I had sort of like started getting more into audio post production, and
Hmm.
so now I alongside still touring with a couple different bands. My partner is a great songwriter, and we work together quite a bit. That's the banjo you can see
Okay.
hanging. That's her
Okay.
banjo. Um, but yeah, I also work at a studio here in town and have a kind of project studio space that I do a lot of like mixing and production out of.
Okay.
Um, and
So now do you
also,
mainly, sorry to
sorry,
interrupt, but do you
no, it's
mainly focus on post production, or do you do the engineering and get the captures? Or you kind of
I
just work
I
on mix and cleaning up tracks
I mean
after
I
the
think,
fact?
yeah, sorry. I think everything. I'm sort of I've gone all in just on being the everything engineer,
Hmm.
because I think there are a lot of people, as per our conversation earlier, as rough as the music industry is from the perspective of like a side person or somebody working in the quote unquote art music world, like songwriters especially, it's really, really lonesome. Like
Sure.
it's can be really, really tough. And so if you're just working on, you have your 5 songs that you like and you just need a demo to get out and shop to labels or like send to venues so you can get your first couple gigs, like really you just need somebody who can kind of be the whole, like do everything for you, get it done quickly and move on. And so I'm kind of in between all of these spaces. I work at a studio in town where we work mostly on jazz records, and
Okay.
that's a lot of capture. Um,
That
but
seems
that,
like a popular thing in New York. Like I know a lot of friends in New York, and everybody's doing a record over there, and
yeah,
that's. I think jazz musicians in general are always putting out records.
yeah,
Probably
yeah.
more
Well, they
so
make
than
a
the
lot of
singers.
records.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they do, and not a lot of money, but a lot of records.
and
Uh,
the post production on that kind of stuff is usually pretty limited as well, right?
mhm.
Because you don't have as much editing usually.
Right.
Mastering is a simpler process, stuff like that. So it's really. all over the place. And I mostly got interested in this for my own sake because during the pandemic, um, I just wanted to be making and writing my own music more, and learning more about capture and then learning more about production was sort of like the quickest way into doing that for me.
Okay.
I never really played piano growing up. Like I'm learning now. I'm like in the shed on piano every morning
Yeah, yeah,
now.
yeah.
And um, just from a compositional standpoint, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So really everything that I do, everything that I write myself comes from the bass
Okay.
initially. And yeah, we all know
And
how. Sorry.
what kind of genre and style is that? Is that in a chamber music, improvised music marriage like what you do with Nine Horses, or is that something completely different?
I think it's something completely different, but it is largely informed. It's largely informed by a lot of that experience. Like I during the pandemic, I made a record of songs that I wrote where I'm singing and kind of had people multi-track on top of it, but it in the bass is kind of like the central element of it. I also have like written for film where I'm dubbing basses and using effects and kind of like layering things in more of a chamber music-y kind of setting, but it's not obviously. I think one of the qualifiers of chamber music is that it's like people in a chamber in a room playing
Right.
music together, right? So it's not exactly that, but
Actually, I don't know the history of that term. Is that
I
where
don't
it
either.
comes from? Yeah.
I just assume that that's what that means, but
That would make sense. I've never thought about it. And when someone says chamber music, you always think like I don't really know what it is, but I know what it is. Like, okay, like I get it, but I don't really know what it is.
yeah,
It usually means like an atypical instrumentation or something like that, and smaller group. But
yeah.
I don't really know what the parameters of the phrase are.
That's a good point. I'm not sure either. I assume that that's what
Yeah.
it is. It's like, but yeah. Anyways, it's kind of uh yeah, it's almost hard to sorry, it's confusing to talk about.
That's
It's
all
like
right. That's all right.
there's so much there. But yeah, so I think really it all comes from this place of I'm greedy and I want to have my hands in as much music as possible and
Sure.
just playing the bass, as beautiful and incredible as the instrument is, and I do think of myself first as a bass player always and always
Right, right.
will. um like it's working in engineering and production is a great way to kind of like have more music going on. Also, I get to work with other bass players, which is just that's what we all want to do, right? Is hang out with
Sure.
other bass. So
Sometimes. you know. I mean, I can't really say that. I have a whole thing going on where I talk to bass players, but
yeah,
you know. All right, let's talk about the record. So, what number record is this? Uh, for Nine Horses.
this is the fourth record. I mean, it's the third LP. It's the third full
Hmm.
length. We did a an EP in 2021. It was shorter, but I think of that. Even that is still. It's so involved. Like I said, this music. It's involved to listen to. It's especially involved to perform and play. And so when I think of it, I think of it as the fourth record. Yeah.
Okay. And then, what kind of performance outlets are there? Like, do you guys play little clubs? You putting together like a run of dates up the coast?
Yeah, so it's a lot of the time we work in we'll play jazz clubs, we'll play performing arts centers, little clubs, whatever, kind of usually more soft cedar
Hmm.
kind of scenarios. A lot of what we do is academic residencies, like you were talking about earlier, where schools kind of basically contract the band to come talk about what it's like to work in the modern music industry.
Sure.
Um, and we kind of do our best to to inform students about kind of what the life is like, and and what to expect, like you were talking about earlier. And yeah, and then we do performances in conjunction with that, teach lessons, um, all of that, which is a really cool. I haven't worked with another group that kind of is taking advantage of that model.
We'll be back right after this.
Right, the middle of the show, features are brought to you by the International Society of Bassists, commonly referred to as ISB. Stop by isbworldoffice.com for everything you need to know about latest news, happening, events, what have you. Information on players, albums, all kinds of wonderful things. isbworldoffice.com. Folks, for listeners that have been with me since the early days of the podcast, my guest on episode number 5 was Gary Wicks. Gary Wicks now has a new group titled Is That You? The band Is That You has a new EP out. EP is a collection of 4 cinematic instrumentals with nods to 70s funk, and it also incorporates modern electronic elements. It has this overarching feel of just like throwback crime story music. You'll know what I mean when you listen to it. You absolutely should. EP Split 5 Ways is really killing. I hope you all take a few minutes to check it out. It is on all the major streaming platforms. I will have a link to it in the show notes. Again, the group is titled Is That You? And their debut EP is titled Split 5 Ways. Check it out. I do think that that's a very cool model, and I think that that's almost, I think it's underexplored by groups just from a business standpoint. Before art or education, if we're not before, but just from a business standpoint, it's guaranteed money, that you can get for doing the gig, because the schools have to spend the budget. Otherwise, they can't get that much budget for the following year.
Yeah.
So it's kind of guaranteed bread, which is cool. And it's a way to build a fan base,
Yeah.
which is also cool. But I do think that it's relevant for students to hear and see people doing it, and hopefully engage with some questions about how the band or the individual artist, musician has navigated their career, because I wouldn't know, always what to say to, students. I teach at a college, and I don't really talk to the students about that because I don't know, I show up and I do the thing at the class. But I don't really talk to students about, what the real world is like, because we're all kind of trying to figure it out in real time. That's why I'm at the college.
Right.
I never intended to, have that be a part of my day or week, but here I am, because they pay me to do it. So I show up and do it.
Yeah.
But I don't have any answers for it,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I often feel the same way. And that's an especially galling thing when you're employed to be there to talk about that, and yeah, it can be really interesting, but it's also very, very cool to work with, I think, that age of student and over a period of time. Like when I started doing that, I was not much older than a lot of the students, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so sort of had this relationship where I was like, I could really see where they were at, and we had shared references, like all of this stuff. And now I feel very much I'm really looking at them and I'm like, oh, you're really like a different kind of animal than, like somebody who was 15 years older than me when I was in school would look at me and be like, oh, you're, yeah. And I think also it's been interesting in the respect of like observing musical trends.
Mm-hmm.
Like we see a lot more kids coming through schools now who their side projects are, they're DJs, or they're writing EDM, or they're kind of like they're almost like exclusively performing on laptops, stuff like that, right? And obviously then it becomes this thing of like, well, then why are you learning to play the G major scale on the violin, or like, and that's kind of what they want to talk about a lot of the time is like, what's the purpose of me what's the purpose of this counterpoint class for me if
Sure.
what I want to do is this other thing eventually or something like that. And,
Do you and the bandmates from Nine Horses talk about this and how this can impact the band? So instead of just giving, this information to the students, do you guys speak about it internally and talk about how you can not use the same concepts, but explore it together? Like, okay, where do we want to go? What's our vision for the next couple of years with the project? How can we get there? And how is what we're doing now equaling that?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. And again, that kind of comes back to what I was saying earlier about how it is nice to kind of catch up after a few months or after, everybody in the group, in that core, the core trio of the group is sort of coming from a really, really different place and has a really different experience in the working period. So Joe is a composer, that's a huge part of what he does and where he spends his time. He also was recently playing on Broadway, had a seat on the revival of Oklahoma that closed just a couple of years ago now. And Sarah is a really brilliant. She's just so good in all ways, but she is really jazz community here in New York and is like the jazz violin call for a lot of people.
That's a unique niche. Now I love
totally.
love when violin is played well in an improvised context, and I have a couple records, with that have violin on it, and I think it's killing when it's done well.
Yeah. And she really is. She really brings it. I gotta say, nice. She's an exceptional musician. But she has this like experience, that's very different. And then I'm out working with songwriters a lot. I spend most of my time kind of, for them, they would call it pop music.
Right.
But I would, I don't think I would define it as pop music, but those three perspectives are all coming in and sometimes clashing and I feel like often, especially when we're working at schools, a lot of the time, what we'll do in a class is we'll kind of argue about things, like in front of a class. But I think in a way like that can be informative, right?
I think that there is a lesson there, for the students. Yeah.
Yeah. And in a loving way, of course, but
right. And not dropping F-bombs and like storming out.
Yeah.
Damn it, Sarah! Damn it, you're doing that again! I quit! That'd be funny.
Yeah. But then we'll get in the van, and kind of talk about like where we're interested in going, what we're kind of like. Well, one of the huge talking points lately of the group has been with these the last two records we've made have been heavily expanded. I think there were like on this latest on Strum, the latest record, there were like 30 or so different collaborators that are playing, all different types of instruments and like Joe is writing the music for that expanded group. And then we have to find a way to like perform them kind of more as like tunes,
right?
When the three of us get together to like give a performance, right? And on the subject of the state of the music industry, it's not always financially viable for us to like bring 5 other people on the road.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I mean, even major artists don't tour with the full band. They'll have an East Coast band, a West Coast band,
exactly,
a Central America band, because it's too much to fly guys, the band over from the other coast.
Right. Yeah, and often too much to ask of that, too much time to ask of people to do that for, like,
I mean, we would all do it if the money were right, though.
Right, of course.
If like the money was cool, like sure,
it's a gig.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So that's been one of the big kind of like talking points lately is like, do you just scale everything down? Do you try to expand the touring outfit? Do you bring in electronic elements to like fill in, like an SPD or like sample, live sampling, stuff like that to kind of like fill out the textures and / like, or even philosophically, is it even is it our responsibility to give a rendering of the record at a live performance
Well,
at all?
that's a great question actually that you propose. Is the live performance a reflection of the album, or is the album a reflection of the live performance? Now, I want to talk about that in relation to how you and Nine Horses have talked about this and kind of what ideas you've kicked down. But I also want to talk about it in relation to you making records for other people.
Yeah.
Is the album you create with the artist a reflection of what they do, or is what they do a reflection of the album that you're creating with them?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a whole can of worms there, I think.
Right? Yeah, yeah. It could, and I think it's different for every artist,
That's
depending on the thing. You know, I've uh, I've gone out to see some of my favorite singer songwriters. One specifically is Amos Lee, and
sure.
last time I saw him, it was just him and acoustic guitar. But then some of his records are really produced, you know.
Yeah,
But he'll do the tunes just himself, and I didn't feel anything was lacking, and I didn't miss anything.
right. Yeah. I think you're totally right on. Like it just totally depends on the artist.
Hmm.
I think it totally depends on literally technically what the artist is capable of
Yeah,
live, like some people can totally rip a solo show
sure.
and you won't miss anything. I saw Corey Henry at the Blue Note a couple of
Mm.
months ago play
Well,
solo, and it
yeah,
was
of
just
course.
like,
Yeah, like
it's like,
right.
okay, yeah, great. Like I don't
Yeah,
need, it
yeah.
would have
That's
been
gonna be
cool to see somebody
ridiculous.
else, but
Yeah.
yeah, like I think it totally depends. I think there's also increasingly there's a sort of um there's sort of this idea that you can't produce the record live anyways unless you have like Taylor Swift level budgets.
Right, right, right.
Like there's so much production going into the way modern records are made that it would be really, really hard to reproduce, sorry, that sound live.
Mhm.
And at that point, like, what I guess you would have to ask yourself, as the artist, what are your audience members actually paying a ticket price for?
Mhm.
Some people, I think, in my experience touring, it definitely feels like with some artists and some people they're buying a ticket specifically just so that they can come say hi to you at the merch table afterward, because they want kind of this like relationship, right? This
Mhm.
parasocial relationship with you. Some people literally just want to hear you sing the songs. Some people are really there for like the musical kind of, and everybody listens to music in different ways, and like that's okay. And I guess it's a puzzle that every artist has to figure out for themselves. I definitely am leaning kind of aesthetically more these days on the side of um I want the music that I'm producing and recording and writing to feel really human.
Mhm.
I think maybe because of the, you know, growing morbid fear of AI and whatever. Like I don't know what that's about. I don't
Sure.
know
Yeah, and
anything
how that's
about
gonna
that.
impact what I know I don't really like. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm scared to learn more about it because
Yeah. But I think it's driven always by the records that I like to listen to, which are the ones where, you hear a vocal or you hear a violin or a guitar, and you feel like they're either like they're in the room with you, or it has an intimacy that is kind of directed to the listener.
mhm.
Um, and I think that's achievable with electronic production and synth and everything else, but it's not. I think it might be a little harder, or it's not as kind of apparent to me all the time. You know.
When producing a record or taking that to the stage.
Sorry, I'm talking about like I think with the blown out electronic production of
Oh
like
yeah, yeah.
say I'm trying to think of a recent record. What was one of the records I was listening to recently that's really interesting is there's a new Maggie Rogers, who's she's a pop star at this point, has a new record, and it's previously her records were a lot of like, it was composed, but it's very kind of, it's electronic production. It's a lot of like synth sounds and digital. It's a lot of digital sounds.
Yeah.
And her new record is very like, strumming electric guitar, acoustic and electric guitars. It's acoustic drum set. It's like very clearly like a drummer playing drums. And there's like, I think there might be a theme kind of coming of like I'm hearing more and more of these records that are feeling more human right now to my ears. In terms of reproducing those live, sorry, I kind of dodged your question, but
it's all right.
But yeah, obviously then it becomes easier to reproduce those live because you just need the human elements. You don't have to like, find a way to make all the other special stuff happen on stage. But again, like I think it all depends on the artist and kind of what they're about. I will say personally from my listening experience, like the karaoke thing is the thing that I buy the least. When you show up to a show and it's like somebody singing to a track,
sure,
it's like, yeah, that's the thing that I kind of am like, okay, I'd rather just hear you like play guitar and play the songs and yeah.
So how is the band kind of, well, first, has the band kind of decided on how they're going to approach, collectively approach this idea of reining in the big sound into a small thing? Yeah. Have you guys figured out an approach, or are you still sorting that out?
Well, we have an upcoming show. We have done it sort of like a dry run about a month ago, where we were playing kind of new arrangements of the tunes that are on the record for the trio.
Okay.
And so obviously, there's the size of the sound is significantly kind of like lessened when you just have less.
Right.
But yeah, so that's kind of been the solution, is that we still want to perform as a trio.
Okay.
But also Joe is kind of the mastermind of a lot of the music in the first place. And I'm sort of a mind that if somebody's going to write a bunch of music, you don't, as a collaborator or whatever, no matter how kind of like intimately linked your relationship is, you don't really have a right to like tell them how to do it or what to do.
Right. So there's a delicate balance there of giving input and then just staying in your lane.
Yeah, playing the gig, right? And so but we kind of did come up with this idea sort of collaboratively of like, okay, so if if I can do this thing and he knows enough about all of our instruments at this point that he's kind of aware of what can be achieved, say through like some extended techniques, or we sort of have a relationship where often I'll pull him aside and I'll be like, oh, check this thing out I've been working on, or whatever, just to like put more ideas into his head about what the bass can do. So yeah, anyway, that's sort of where we're headed with these performances. Yeah.
All right. Is extended technique something you spend time working on?
I will say, I mean, for this band specifically, and in general, the way that I like to be involved in playing collaboratively with people is I like to play all of the bass, or I like bands that ask me to play all of the bass,
Sure.
And especially if they're demanding. One of the things that I've done quite a bit is I play duo with a songwriter.
Okay.
And so it's like just, bass, and usually they're playing guitar. And, that can be really cool to just play the bass line and maybe sing harmonies or something, like you can contribute. But then also like every now and then there's like a guitar solo on the record and you want to try to recreate that. And so yeah, I would say that expanding the soundscape of like what can happen just from this one instrument, whether that be through extended technique, or I have a little pedal board that I like to use
Yeah,
live. And
I was gonna go there too. If you get into electronics, and if so, what are they?
yeah, so all sorts of stuff. I mean, it's been a journey. I won't say that I've kind of like fully come to I haven't arrived
Yeah,
yet with the live setup, but for a long time I was using Ableton Live on
mm,
stage, and so I was
no,
sampling and using their controller, and then kind of like creating effects. I've done some projects where we use samples of spoken word. And
that's
so
cool.
it's good to be able to like sample, or not sample, but trigger those samples live,
Yeah.
and then kind of affect them. And when the nice thing about live is that it's all in your computer. At some point, I sort of got jaded about having a laptop on stage with me and decided that that wasn't kind of the presentation of me playing music that I wanted to
Hmm.
give anymore. And so I did away with that and moved to a pedal board setup. And it changes a lot. I mean, the kind of the things that stay there, I usually have some kind of looper or micro looper.
Mm,
Um, I love delays, kind of
okay.
creating, like textural stuff. Granular delays are so great for that. Um, there's a pedal that I've added recently, um, made by a company called Chase Bliss. It's called Mood. That's like it's in the ambient music world. It's sort of becoming, I think, an industry standard.
What
Reverbs,
uh
stuff like that.
what
So
what kind of effect is it? Is it a delay reverb thing, or is it kind of
yeah,
like a ring
yeah.
modulator, or does it do all
is Craig Gash. Subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on the Instagram, the YouTube. Leave us a comment.
All right. That was my talk with Andrew Ryan. Again, the band is 9 Horses, and their latest album is titled Strum. Check that record out wherever you check out records. It is very creative and very accessible, and it was a pleasant surprise when I got a chance to listen to that album. Fantastic release. That's about all I got for this one, folks. That's about all I got. I'll catch you on the next one in a minute.